So the first version of today's homily started with me trying to break open the reading that Mara did today with Saul and David. And then I realized I really don't like this guy, David, despite the fact that he chose on multiple occasions not to kill Saul, who was coming after him. So I shifted my focus. And so today I want to share with you what I call a tale of three women, each of whom model creative nonviolence and love of their enemies, which to me is the real message of our readings today. So let's start with the 92-year-old woman. Not in our community, though. I had no idea who she was. Perhaps because I had never linked the words creative and nonviolence. This quote caught my eye. The first essential characteristic of nonviolent action is that it is creative. The first essential characteristic of nonviolent action is that it is creative. The woman behind the quote is Hildegard Goss Meyer, a leader of the International Fellowship of Reconciliation, who, along with her husband Jean, spent decades traveling the world training people in nonviolence and peacemaking. Thomas Merton went so far as to suggest that Hildegard would be his candidate for sainthood. But by a show of hands here, how many of you have heard of her? Okay, we got one here in the chapel. We see a couple on Zoom. Okay, great. So now after today, we will all have heard of her because there's more than one Hildegard in our history. In the book, Marked for Life, the story of Hildegard Goss Meyer, Richard Dietz offers perspective on what, for Hildegard, was a defining moment. Picture this, and I quote, when she was 12, the Third Reich in full swing, she stood on a crowded street in Vienna, Austria, as Adolf Hitler, standing tall, chest out with smug bravado, rolled along in an open car. Tens of thousands pressed close along the route and raucously cheered and waved. Everyone but Hildegard. She refused to raise her arm to join in the thunderous chant, Heil Hitler. Hildegard shares, I felt a huge force pressing on me, which swept everyone away. And I said to myself, you have to resist. You can't let yourself get caught up. Don't raise your hand, even if they lynch you. That could be a defining moment. Hildegard's relationship with nonviolence continued as the war ended, and she recounts this story. We were deeply afraid as the Red Army approached Vienna in April of 1945. The Nazi army in retreat from Russia had burned everything in its path, right to the ground. We had good reason to fear retribution. A Russian soldier slammed the butt of his rifle against the front door, and my father, Caspar Meyer, opened the door and invited the soldiers in. The dining table was set. He invited them to sit and eat. The baffled soldiers ate heartily, and one of the Russian soldiers pointed at a crucifix on the wall and said, "Ah, Christos." After eating, the Russian soldiers left the house undisturbed. So profound was the culture of nonviolence in her home that despite living through the Nazi regime, Hildegard dedicated her life to practicing this radical Christian love of enemies. Beginning in the 50s, she traveled promoting peacemaking in Poland and other communist countries throughout Europe, then to South America, Bolivia, and Argentina specifically, and the Philippines. Everywhere she went, writes Mary Reed Corrigan McGuire in the foreword to the book Marked for Life, she joined in solidarity with the people, sharing her belief and truth that killing is not in the spirit of true love, and that all faiths can join together in spreading this truth, that every human life is sacred, and the Spirit of God lives in all men and women. And even to those that she disagreed with, Hildegard demonstrated a deep respect and reverence for their point of view. She can teach us all. The next woman I want to highlight is not 92 years old, but is 24. Earlier this month, I helped her with her resume. She had left northern Afghanistan in 2021, the fourth quarter of last year, and presents as older and wiser than her years. One of 9 children, she shared with me that her father is dead and her 2 older brothers had been killed by the Taliban. As an ethnic minority, her life was in danger. And she knew she had to leave Afghanistan when she found that she was being followed. It broke her heart to leave her mother and her siblings. And since she's left, she hasn't been able to communicate with her family due to the escalating violence, food shortages, people being displaced, and all financial assets being frozen. Despite having grown up in a war zone, this is traumatizing. And even though she wishes she didn't have to start over and begin again, Hadia has hope. She shared with me that in working with her lawyer, she actually suggested that she wanted to write to the judge and request that her asylum hearing be expedited. It was originally scheduled for May of 2022. Her lawyer discouraged her and told her that no one she'd worked with directly had had success directly petitioning the judge. Hadia wrote anyway. To her surprise, and to her lawyer's surprise, Hadia's hearing was expedited, and she was granted asylum in January. Now that she can legally work, she is committed to continuing to do human rights work with women and children. My third example highlights Madeleine Dean, the US Congresswoman from Pennsylvania's 4th Congressional District, which encompasses the majority of Montgomery County and part of Bucks counties. You may recall that I believe in November, a couple of months ago, Carol introduced the book Under Our Roof, A Son's Battle for Recovery, a Mother's Battle for Her Son, in a homily. Madeleine and Harry Canane co-authored the book. And in the interest of transparency, I will share with you that Madeleine is married to my husband Stan's cousin, PJ. It's not true that I know everyone in Montgomery County, but just in this case, right? So you may wonder, however, how Madeleine connects to our theme today of loving enemies and creative nonviolence. And here's how. All of our enemies are not people and groups. They can also manifest as addictions that we are totally powerless over. It's challenging to love when addictions erode relationships. When PJ and Madeline drove Harry to Karen, where he was going to detox and rehab, Mad wrote Harry a note and left it with him to read after they had dropped him off. Following years, about a decade of mistrust and miscommunication and anger, part of Mad's note simply read, "My dear Harry, I love you. I am proud of you. I have such optimism and confidence in you. You are an amazing young man with many gifts. Addiction has tried to bury your gifts. Don't let that happen. I love you more than you know." And she signed it, Mommy. Let me conclude today with this. The message of our scriptures is the golden rule: simple, radical, and countercultural. But it's hard. Treat others the way you would want to be treated. When we encounter violence, we can choose to submit, fight, or creatively resist. If you find that you're hungry for a refresher on how creative nonviolence worked in India or Nashville, Tennessee, or South Africa, I recommend you watch the documentary, A Force More Powerful. It's available on YouTube, and the link will be in the printed version of this homily that goes out. God bless you all.